So we rode last night, no, 2 nights ago. This bike is up to 71 hours. The packing's finally shot in the silencer, which not surprising. Actually really surprised I got 70 hours out of it. And I think it's time for a top end. It's making some noise that I don't really like, so I'm gonna check. I'd like to get the top end off and see if the connecting rod and crank bearings are okay. Also, the swing arm nut is gone. So, a little bit of maintenance. Like most of my videos lately, the garage is an absolute nightmare. However, the engine's out of the KTM 50 Mini. Got it up on the toolbox and pull the head, pull the cylinder and see what I got. It's got 71 hours on it. It's definitely time for a top end. Not that it's running poorly, but it has a terrible noise when you let off the throttle. I think it's a rod or a crank bearing. We're gonna find out. When you're pulling the head off this little KTM, there's 2 lineup studs. You can kind of see that one. There's one that goes in that hole. That one stayed in the cylinder. I'm going to pull it out so they don't lose it, but just keep an eye on those so you don't lose them. All right, so the cylinder and head are off. Piston shows some wear. I mean, hard to look at just rings and see if they're worn. They definitely have some wear at 71 hours. Actually, this was done at like 30 hours, so it has 41 hours. Thereabouts, 40, 50 hours on this top end. Piston definitely shows some wear. Cylinder really looks okay. You can still see cross hatching in some of it. The bottom side, the intake side, and your exhaust side shows some, not gouging, there's just linear wear instead of cross hatching. You can kind of see it there. So we're going to hone the cylinder, put a piston on, piston and rings in it. Now that the piston's off the connecting rod, you can see a little more wear on the side of the piston. This is intake side. There's your exhaust side. The ring has no lineup pin. Yes, so there it is. So you can see corresponding wear on the ring. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there is corresponding wear on the ring. So now we just got to check this cylinder and see if it's matches spec. So grab the snap gauges. Oh, it's gonna be hard to see. Dumping coolant all over the top of my box. Grab the snap gauges. And I'm gonna check it in multiple angles, but specifically, thinking about this, if it's gonna wear, in my opinion, it's gonna wear intake to exhaust because of the direction of the wrist pin and the direction that engine rotates. That's where the most wear is gonna be, front and rear of that cylinder. But I'm gonna check it 45 or 90 degrees from that as well. we're gonna switch our mic, or our caliper rather. Real fancy tools here. Harbor Freight's finest. I'm gonna switch it over to metric because I'm sure the spec's gonna be in metric. So that's 39.54 millimeters that way. That is perpendicular. That's parallel with the connecting rod or the wrist pin. So this is perpendicular where I think if it's gonna have where it's gonna be. This is at the top of the cylinder. I'm gonna try it at the bottom as well. But like I said, I'm looking for egg-shaped or anywhere in that cylinder before we even worry about checking it against the spec. 39.53. So maybe a hair. Nothing too crazy. I'm sure that's going to be within spec as far as the difference. I don't know if it's within spec for the actual diameter. 39.54 or 50 at the bottom. $39.49. It's bigger at the bottom. No. 0.005 of an inch, or of a millimeter difference from top to bottom of the cylinder. But it's even wear. So I'm going to check it against the spec. If it's still within spec, I'm just going to hone it and put the piston and ring in it and run it for another 70 hours, hopefully. So Easton tells me he wants to go to the track Sunday. I don't know if that's gonna happen, dude. I'm not a magician. I gotta give a quick shout out to Point View Cycle. Just left there. It's a Saturday morning. We had a big storm come through at the end of the week, and they have no internet, no phones, no nothing. And I came out here knowing, according to the internet, they were open. So I came out here. Sorry, I got a shift. I came out here right when they opened to get a brake spring because I lost a swing arm nut off the KTM Mini. Came out to get a brake spring, and not only were they open, they were taking, paper orders, but they had no problem taking down my debit card information and billing me later. The dude knew the part number for the brake spring off the top of his head. Just great dudes. Point View Cycle in Canfield, Ohio. Check them out if you got a KTM and you're in the area. Real quick to go along with that KTM 50 Mini top end, I'm going to repack this silencer because at 71 hours it finally blew out the packing. This thing was whisper quiet the last time we took it to ride, and while riding it got loud. There's literally zero packing left, nothing left. Just a little tiny bit there at the end. It's packed full of oil too, so I'm going to clean this up some and repack it. All right, so there's all the packing that was left in that exhaust and that silencer. I brake cleaned out all the old oil and gunk. Now just to repack it, which normally I'd take the packing and cut it like a ½ an inch longer than the center of that silencer. But since I have this flange at the end, I'm going to cut it to the distance between the flange and the end. So that FMF packing actually on this Mini gives you enough to do it twice. So you cut it right down the center. It's plenty long enough for what's left on one. So normally on a big bike, I would silicone, high temp silicone these ends. But this thing, I'm not real sure the angle. And I can change the angle of the hanger, obviously, by spinning it. And there was no silicone on it when I took it apart. Like no sealer from the factory, so we're gonna let it roll like that. So this pipe's been on there for 71 hours. I'm gonna try to take some Mother's aluminum polish, just clean it up a little bit. I just tested it there. It wasn't a whole lot of work, so it's not gonna be perfect, but it should be a lot better. right, not perfect, but it looks quite a bit better than it did. I'm not worried about it right where it comes out of the head. You can't see it anyway. All right, back to the engine. The hone that I have is a little too big. We might have gone over that already. So I'm waiting on Amazon to bring me the next size down for that cylinder. In the meantime, I'm gonna get these gaskets off. Well, I thought I was gonna have to take a razor blade to it. Guess I'm not. So clean up these gasket mating surfaces in the cylinder, in the base. The top's just O-rings. I'll get those out of there and get everything cleaned up. Make sure we're ready to go. As soon as that hone gets here, I can get the cylinder hone and get this bike back together. We're trying to ride tomorrow. All right, so the factory gasket is, oh, we need to be in millimeters, 0.43. Now it's been squished already between the cylinder and the head, so we're at 0.43. Gaskets that come in a kit, there's 0.38, so that's gonna be too thin. There's 0.15, that's gonna be way too thin. 0.57, too thin. 0.48, so that's the one we're gonna use, the 0.48 cylinder gasket. Now the rest of these I'm gonna put aside so I don't get them mixed up. I gently clamped that cylinder in the vise, used a rag for some cushion between the jaws, just so I don't get any marring on the bottom of that cylinder. But I'm gonna run, if you look and see here, this is an 1 5/8" flex hone. It's a little big. It calls for one between 1.5 and 1 5/8". So the 1.5 one's on its way allegedly via Amazon. So we'll see when it gets here. So back to the base gasket stuff. What we'll do once I have, I guess I could put the piston on it. Really, to check this base gasket properly, I would put the piston on, torque the cylinder down, put a straight edge across the top of the cylinder, and then measure the clearance between the top of the piston and the bottom of that straight edge. However, just to check your deck height, you don't want positive deck height. I'm just gonna go with what I had gasket height wise. If it's a little lower, I'll gain a little bit of compression. I don't think I have clearance issues to worry about to hitting the head. And if it's a little taller, I'll lose a little bit of compression, but it's not gonna be taller. In case you're wondering why I wrapped that rag around the opening to the bottom end, I've been bit by that before trying to fight those wrist pin clips in there. They're a bit of a wrestling match, and I've dropped them before down into the cases, and I didn't want to do that today because I didn't want to split these cases. Once you use the hone, it'll zoom, focus. Not really. Need a flashlight. You can kind of see it. You can see where it was polished, and now there's cross hatching in it. So the rings will seat. All right. I think everything's good. I'm gonna change oil, but I'm gonna wait till after I start it. What do you think? Good idea. All right, everything's back together. Oil injection soaked up, fuel soaked up, and on. Wait, no coolant. All right, so coolant's topped off. I left the radiator cap off so it can burp. Guess we'll see if she starts, right? What do you think?